Greetings once again today. Getting ready. I'm cooking my farro chicken noodle soup here for Sabbath. That's coming up, and we were discussing Adam's sin. So I'd like to jump right into Genesis. I had asked that you read Genesis, the first few chapters, in my last video so that you'd be up to par on what we're going to cover. And hopefully you're going to see that in these scriptures that it was actually Satan that delivered the law to Adam. Okay, actually to Eve, you know, she was deceived because Satan did show her one law that, you know, just like with this window over here where I tell my children, you know, to not do anything, you know, any writing with their fingers and such when the windows are foggy or whatever, because it leaves that, you know, imprint on there. So they put on there, "I love you, Dad." Okay, well, that's basically the same thing that Adam did, because he wanted to be just like his dad, just like his creator. I mean, Adam loved Yahweh for what he did for him, and he wanted to be like his father. And just the same as every child of Yahweh or brother to Yahshua Messiah would like to be, you know, of the Father, like the Father. So anyway, let's start here in Genesis 1, and probably the best place to start is in verse 23. I want to show what goes on here at the last part of Genesis 1, you know, as far as creating man and the animals and such. But then it gets into detail in chapter 2. So I'd like to just get on reading this and say, verse 23 of Genesis 1, "And there was evening and there was morning, a fifth day." And I totally do believe that these were 24-hour periods. The sun was created, the moon was already created. It was, you know, part of a clock, a piece of a clock, that when everything was all set, then, you know, it was the way it is until now, that timepiece where we have 24 hours in a day. Of course, Yahshua, you can say, said that there's 12 hours in a day, but he was talking about daylight, and he meant approximately, I mean, if you look actually at the calendar, you'll only see 2 times a year that there's actually 12 hours in a day. And then there's times at the North and the South Pole that there's not even that. Okay, they have days for months and they have nights for months. Anyway, "And there was evening and there was morning, a fifth day. And Yahweh said, Let the earth bring forth living creatures after their kind, cattle and creeping things, and beasts of the earth after their kind. And it was so. And Yahweh made the beasts of the earth after their kind, and the cattle after their kind, and everything that creeps in the ground after its kind. And Yahweh saw that it was righteous." Now once again, it's got good in there, but I explained earlier where you should take out the good and put righteous in there, because everything was according to Yahweh's law, the law of gravity, and everything was already there. The laws that keep the moon in the orbit around the earth and all things. And Yahweh was keeping his law, so everything he put his hands to do was actually created righteous. Satan, the devil, was righteous at one time. At this end of creation, everything was created, all the holy Malachim. And then, of course, when the holy Malachim started turning toward Lucifer's teaching, toward the bringer of light's teaching, they started to fall from the position that they had. They were created immortal, and they were given a position that, you know, if they chose evil, well, they'd have to suffer with that forever, because they was created totally righteous. Their mind was completely open to what was true and what was right. They knew Yahweh's law. Man didn't know Yahweh's law, but these beings that are in heaven, Yahweh says that nobody will get there. No one will be in heaven unless they keep his law. So everything was created righteously. Then Yahweh said, "Let us make man in our image." Okay, now who is this our image? Well, it could have been the Malachim, because it doesn't really say when he created the Malachim. Okay, and because the Malachim are spiritual and Yahweh is spiritual, that's what man was first created as, was a more spiritually inclined being than just of the flesh. In fact, there was no sin whatsoever in the kingdom, and if you are to be spiritual minded, your mind is to be on the kingdom, and then you are spiritual. So man can still be spiritual now, as the way that Adam was created here as well. Then Yahweh said, let us make man in our image, according to our likeness. And of course, Holy Spirit, he may have been referring to as well in this. I'm not exactly certain, but, it's not like Yahshua was sitting there with him. No, Yahshua's name was written down before the heavens were, the foundations were even laid for the heavens or the earth. But Yahshua wasn't there. Anybody that believes that Yahshua Messiah was Yahweh and jumped down, into Miriam's womb after playing his harp in the cloud for, who knows how many years, it states that such as those are the anti-messiahs, because Yahshua Messiah began in the flesh. He became a child from the implantation of a sperm cell into Mary's egg. And of course, you're going to see here where the rib from Adam was taken out to create a woman. And there's hermaphrodites all over the planet today, and I'm not saying anything bad or anything great about them. All I'm saying is that with womankind, it came directly from males, from the male Adam. And there shouldn't be no problem whatsoever for Yahweh to create a sperm cell in a male's body that Eve's was created from, to fertilize her own egg. So, as far as that virgin birth, I've got my own opinions, my own insights on those things, based on scripture and study and research, and I do believe that that's what occurred, was a sperm cell entered her egg. That's where Yahshua began, was in the flesh, just like scripture said. And because Adam is to be, or Yahshua is also to be as the second Adam, or is the second Adam, think about the creation, how that worked, it all fits in. And Yahweh said, let us make man in our image, according to our likeness, and let them rule over the fish, and over the sea, and over the birds of the sky, and over the cattle, and over all the earth, and over every creeping thing that creeps on the earth. And of course, I just want to put in your mind as well that with these animals, they came right up to Adam and Eve, and their children. They just walk right up there and get pet or whatever. It was till after the flood when Yahweh opened the doors on the ark and they got off, and then Yahweh had said that Noah could go ahead and him and his children eat the clean animals, and he also had stated that the beasts of the field and such, these animals, these creations would be dreadful toward man. They'd be scared of man, from then on. Anyway, Yahweh created man in his own image, and in the image he created him, male and female he created them. And Yahweh blessed them, and Yahweh said to them, be fruitful and multiply. He didn't say to wear a condom. He didn't say to take any kind of spermicide or any kind of birth control. He told them to be fruitful and multiply, which is the same command given to those that get married. And you're not supposed to, commit fornication, anything outside wedlock is to be shunned by those that love Yahweh. Of course, we do need those individuals that refuse to keep Yahweh's will, so that we can be tested, by Satan and her children, that we may inherit the kingdom. But, just take the heed, that there was a fella one time that had several brothers, and his oldest brother had a wife, and he died. So his wife was passed down from brother to brother to bring forth a son to the first brother. And it got down to the last brother, and he married her, of course, but he didn't want to bring forth, seed, child for his brother. But these children are all for Yahweh, These are Yahweh's reward. These are things that Yahweh commands you to do. I don't care care if it's your daughter or granddaughter or great-granddaughter or son or whatever. These children are Yahweh's, okay? Plain and simple. They belong to Yahweh. We claim them sometimes, but these things, they belong to Yahweh. And when you put on a condom or use spermicide or do as that one young man did, when he went in and just got his jollies, just like, when people wear condoms and go out there to the bars and find who they can find, and they do not want to bring forth this commandment of being fruitful and multiply. I mean, it's Yahshua right now. It used to be Yahweh, but Yahweh gave the job to Yahshua to open and close the womb. And if you're keeping the commandments and you desire children, I mean, look at Father Abraham and Sarah, how old they were. He opened Sarah's womb. Okay, it had been closed, but it was for a purpose. It wasn't to torment Sarah. It was for a purpose, so that you could understand things out of these scriptures, why everything takes place as it does. But anyway, the fella there, he got his jollies with his brother's wife. Instead of bringing forth a child for his namesake, the guy would get all excited and do his little diddly-diddly thing, and then he would, spill his seed out on the ground. Okay, same thing as wearing a condom or a spermicide or whatever, And because of it, Yahweh found him evil enough that he put the man to death. Okay, the guy wasn't honoring what Yahweh commanded to be done. Be fruitful and multiply, and fill the earth, and subdue it, and rule over the fish of the sea, over the birds of the sky, and over every living thing that moves on the earth. Then Yahweh said, Behold, I have given you every plant yielding seed that is on the surface of the earth, and every tree which has fruit yielding seed, it shall be food for you. And every beast of the earth, and to every bird of the sky, and to everything that moves on the earth, which has life, I have given every green plant for food. Okay, so we're talking even the fish at that time, and they did do studies where they made this large, it's kind of like a terrarium, okay, and it was actually an estuary for birds. And what they did was they put in a large pool, and in that pool they decided to get the most aggressive fish that they knew that were native to America, and they came up with German trout. Okay, so they put the trout into this pool, and they tried feeding the trout. They had birds of all sorts all through there. They were eating the fruits from the trees and such, and then they came to realize that these trout wouldn't eat anything. They put bugs in there, they put worms in there, they put corn, they put everything they could think of that a trout would love to eat, but the trout didn't eat anything, and the trout just kept growing and growing, larger and larger, but they didn't eat anything. They were quite gentle, almost docile, and what they came to realize was that all these birds, from eating the vegetation from the trees and the plants and everything else, was pooping in the water. And from the poop, there was enough minerals and such that was from the vegetation they were eating that the fish didn't need to eat anything, because these nutrients were actually infusing through their skin, through their gills, and, everything else, to where they were actually being nourished, and they weren't aggressive as they are out in the wild. And that's just something to think about, but he gave every green plant for food for everything at first, okay? And Yahweh saw that all he had made, and behold, it was all very righteous. Everything was working according to Yahweh's will. It was all completely working according to his law, even though he didn't put a law down, except for like gravity and things of that sort, that, you cannot escape. And, you law haters out there thinking that the law was done away with, try jumping off a cliff, okay? and say all the way down, oh, the Lord cleansed gravity, done away with it. The Lord, he kept gravity while he was here, okay? He kept gravity. He stayed on the earth, even, of course, he did walk on water there, that it documents once or twice, that he did such a thing, but still, he kept gravity, so it should be done away with also, right? So jump off a cliff and tell me how it works out for you. And Yahweh saw all that he had made, and behold, it was very righteous. And there was evening, and there was morning, the sixth day. Thus the heavens and the earth were completed, and all their host. And by the seventh day Yahweh completed his work which he had done, and rested on the seventh day from all his work which he had done. And Yahweh blessed the seventh day and sanctified it, because in it he rested from all his work which Yahweh had created and made. Now he didn't make Adam do these things, okay? He didn't make Adam keep the Sabbath. Not at first he didn't. There was no law given to Adam at all, except for what you're going to see coming up shortly. Adam wasn't keeping the Sabbath, okay? It's just something that he didn't have to do, and neither did Eve at the time, because there was no law. This is the account of the heavens and the earth when they were created in the day that Yahweh made the earth and the heaven. Now, no shrub of the field was yet in the earth, and no plant of the field had yet been sprouted. For the Father had not sent rain upon the earth, and there was no man to cultivate the ground. But a mist used to rise from the earth and water the whole surface of the ground. In other words, until Noah's flood, there never was a rain cloud. There was never rain or lightning. Never was thunder heard. There wasn't a storm, ever. The way that everything was watered was, like modern days, if you go to an apartment complex in the city or whatever, and they've got green grass, well, you watch at night or whatever, these little things come up, little spouts, and they water down the lawn. Well, this is what the earth was actually created as. This is what we could have had been living in today had Adam not opened up what was to be opened on all mankind, to where all mankind will fall short and bring these curses to where the earth was broken up in the days of Noah, and no longer, except for places like Yellowstone Park, where you see these geysers taking place, these fountains of water being spurted up from the earth. But that's an example you can look at to come to realize that this went on all over the earth. Everything was watered this way. For Yahweh had not set rain upon the earth, and there was no man to cultivate the ground, but a mist used to rise from the earth and water the whole surface of the ground. Then Yahweh formed man of the dust. Okay, now it talked about that over here in chapter 1, okay, where Yahweh created man. But now he's explaining it a little bit better, what actually had gone on the day that he was created. Then Yahweh made or formed man of dust. Now remember, this word dust is quite important too. You'll see in your scriptures that it'll be different from now on whenever you see it, once the point is brought out on this. Then Yahweh formed man of dust from the ground and breathed into his nostrils the breath of life. Okay, this was just a breath of life. This was not the Holy Spirit that was breathed into Adam. This was life. Okay, this was a wind. He blew into his mouth. That's it. Okay, and then life came to Adam. And that's what's passed down to mankind. But once a person dies and he loses that last breath, it goes back out there in the wind. It'll be picked up by somebody else, and they go, they sucked in the last wind. But this is the life that Yahweh's talking about. It's just that you can walk around and talk and think, because when you're in the grave, you can't give praise, thanks, or anything else. You're dead, period. That's it, kapoosh. Yahweh formed man of the dust of the ground and breathed into his nostrils the breath of life, and man became a living being. And the Father planted a garden toward the east in Eden, and there he placed the man whom he had formed. Now notice that every place else on the earth, okay, it was waiting for this mist to come up from the ground to water things, because in verse 5 it said, "Now no shrub of the field was yet in the earth, and no plant of the field had yet sprouted," because this water hadn't yet opened up the seed that was planted by Yahweh Now it's speaking of something totally different that goes on in Eden on this day, is that Yahweh plants a garden. Okay, he's most likely got, full-grown, mature trees. I mean, the things that are in heaven, okay, everything was made after the patterns of what was in heaven. That's what earth is made from. It's from the same pattern. The same thing as the holy vessels, the tabernacle, the chain of command and such that we were to use here when there were Levites and such. These things, it's all a pattern according to what's already in heaven. So it wouldn't be no problem for Yahweh to have brought a few plants from the kingdom that's coming to earth. Nobody's going to heaven. Heaven's coming to earth. It's going to be set down on the earth after Yahshua's 1,000-year millennial reign and after the second resurrection. 100-year Satan's released. People get to do their whatevers. They get to make their choice, because no one's got a choice today except for 144,000 when their mind is opened up to what is true and what is evil, what is righteousness, and what evil is, because the world doesn't know. They reject the law, so they cannot understand. They don't have a choice. There's only 144,000 right now that'll make the right choice. 3 out of 4 fall away, leaving that number. So those ones will be destroyed upon Yahshua's return. But anyway, Yahweh planted a garden toward the east in Eden, and there he placed the man whom he had formed, because there wasn't any shrubs or trees or anything yet on the rest of the earth. Okay? So he made this garden. And in the meantime, while he's in the garden here, doing the things that he's going to do before he actually does his sin, okay, every place else on the planet is now being grown up and producing fruit so that man can live on the outside of this garden. But until then, it was no sense for Adam and Eve to leave this garden, because there was no vegetation that they could eat really out there. It hadn't grown yet. And Yahweh planted a garden toward the east in Eden, and there he placed the man who he had formed. And out of the ground Yahweh caused to grow every tree that is pleasing to the sight and righteous for food. The tree of life. Okay, this is the very same tree you can read in the last chapter of Revelation. I'm not going to go there, I got these allergy problems on me that I can barely even think, so I'm just hoping that Yahshua is going to guide my words, because my brain is quite boggled here. But this tree of life, as is in the beginning, shall be in the end. Okay, this is the tree of life. This is the second Adam's job to open for us. The first Adam opened up the other, as you'll see here shortly. And out of the ground Yahweh caused to grow every tree that is pleasing to the sight and righteous for food. The tree of life also in the midst of the garden, and the tree of the knowledge of righteousness and evil. Now a river flowed out of Eden to water the garden, and from there it divided and became 4 rivers. The name of the first is Pishon. It flows around the whole land of Havilah, where there is gold, and the gold of that land is right. And bdellium and the onyx stone are there, and so on and so forth. Okay, it talks about the river and the Euphrates. Then here in verse 15 it says, Then Yahweh took the man and put him into the Garden of Eden to cultivate and keep it. And Yahweh commanded the man, saying, From any tree of the garden you may eat freely. Okay? He could have even eaten, and he was eating from the tree of life. Okay? He was eating from the tree of life, because as long as he didn't sin, he would have lived forever. In fact, human beings in those days, Adam lived, a long time. Methuselah was like 2,000 years old. If I had $1 for every year that Methuselah was alive on this earth, I'd actually have a larger, net worth than what I have even today. Okay? I don't even have $2,000 to my name. But Methuselah lived a long time. Some of these men were 800-900 years old, and every thought they had was evil continuously. Okay, so at the flood of, where Noah was saved and his family and his wife there, things changed. There's been a big change. Yahweh even decreased the amount of years that man would be able to live because they were already breaking the law and sinners to begin with, which really doesn't mean they're going to go to hellfire and everything else. That's what the first and second resurrections are about, and I do ask you once again to go check those things out. But here in verse 16 it says, "And Yahweh commanded the man, saying, From any tree of the garden you may eat freely, but from the tree of knowledge of righteousness and evil you shall not eat, for in the day that you eat from it you shall surely die." Okay, now death, it came on that very day, because Adam would have lived forever. So his life was actually taken away. Didn't mean he went into the ground and turned back to dust. It was that his life was taken. He died the moment that Eve presented to him one of the laws out of this tree of life. The moment that she presented to him, because the serpent gave her, the serpent is the bringer of light. And light is the law. Truth is the law. The lamp is the law. It's a light to our feet. Satan was the one that actually and initially brought the law of Yahweh, but she did it in such a deceptive way that it caused Adam and Eve to sin. And you'll see this. I'll show it to you. It's coming up. It was showed to me, and I've got no choice but to show it to you. "But from the tree of knowledge and righteousness and evil you shall not eat, for in the day that you eat from it you shall surely die." Then the father said, "It is not right for the man to be alone. I will make him a helper suitable for him." And out of the ground the father formed every beast. Okay, could you see this? Out of the ground now, Yahweh is taking this clay and he's molding this clay, okay, that he made man out of as well. And out of the ground Yahweh formed every beast of the field and every bird of the sky. So there's the question as far as what came first, the chicken or the egg. The chicken came first. He didn't form eggs out of this dirt, this dust, this clay. He formed animals ready to go, just like Adam was formed. He could go at any time, do whatever he wanted. He had intelligence that you'll see is so far above any preacher on this earth. It far surpasses my own. I'm like a speck of dust compared to the intelligence that Adam was blessed with. And you'll see that here in a second. "And out of the ground Yahweh formed every beast of the field and every bird of the sky." Of course, the fish were already made. They were swimming around. "And brought them to man to see what he would call them." Think about it. How many animals do you even know the name of? And they're already named. Okay? Adam named each and every one of them. Yahweh formed these things, brought it to Adam, and says, "Hey, what you going to call this one?" And not only did Adam name them, but he named them according to what they were doing. He could see the attributes of that animal. Okay? And he put a name on it according to the attributes of that animal. "To see what thou shalt call them. And whatever the man called a living creature, that was its name." So I'd like you to sit there. Think about it. Just go through a list of names of animals that you can even think of. Adam say here, the first day of his creation, Yahweh's making these animals out of the dust, out of the clay, and bringing them to him, and saying, "What is the name?" And Adam named every one of these things. I mean, even if it took him 6 days, but it's only one that it shows. But for the 6 days of creation, if it took him 6 days, you probably couldn't read every single animal's name, okay, and bird and such. in a day's time if you had a list of it, or a book of it. But here Adam is, he's so intelligent, he was made in the image and the likeness of Yahweh. This man was far wiser than Solomon was at his creation. But of course, as he goes on in life, he gets a little dumber here. But anyway, he brought the animals, and whatever Adam named them, it was its name. And the man gave names to all the cattle. Oh, see? So it wasn't just one species of cattle. It was to all the cattle. He gave name. You got bison, you got buffalo, you got all these different names for cattle. And each one of these species of cattle, he gave a name to it. And to the birds of the sky and to every beast of the field. But for Adam there was not found a helper suitable for him. So Yahweh caused a deep sleep to fall upon the man, and he slept, and he took one of his ribs and closed up the flesh at that place. And Yahweh fashioned it into a woman, and Yahweh fashioned into a woman the rib which he had taken from the man, and brought her to the man. I mean, could you imagine the joy of this guy when he woke up to see this woman? Somebody of his own, species, I guess you could say, his own race. There's only one race, the human race, okay? But to see that first woman on the whole face of the earth, man, I don't care if she was the ugliest thing on the planet, she must have been totally beautiful. And some claim that she could probably even be seen through the same way Adam was probably seen through as well, because he was so perfectly made. Gold, pure gold, you can actually see through it, and that's what the streets in the kingdom would be made from. And you can see right straight through. They'll be clear as glass, but pure gold. And the man said, it says, and Yahweh fashioned into a woman the rib which he had taken from man, and brought her to the man. And the man said, this is now bone of my bones, and flesh of my flesh. So she shall be called woman, because she was taken out of man. For this cause a man shall leave his father and his mother, and shall cleave to his wife, and they shall become one flesh. Okay? So even in that day, they shall become one flesh. So if you're out there and you're sleeping with whores and harlots, you become one with them. And it talks about that in Corinthians and other places in scriptures as well, where you become at one with who you lay with. And that's why man is supposed to have a wife, and a wife is only supposed to have one husband. Okay? Now, that's where most cancers come today, cervical and such as that, on a female, is because they've had introduced into their womb more than one male's sperm. Okay, and that causes a war within their body. It brings all kinds of disease and pestilence upon the woman, and they bring it on their own self. But the thing is, their parents never taught them that they weren't supposed to do so. Today, it's like status quo. The more men a woman can have, the more notches on her skirt, the greater she rises up in today's society. She's showing her own individualism and this and that and the other thing. She can really think on her own, boy. But people don't realize the curses that are coming upon them just because of Adam's sin that is upon you, whether you want to admit it or not. You still have the same curses going to come to you if you do not repent and be baptized, as what came on Adam, which is death. Okay? Now death, Adam's going to be in the kingdom. There's no doubt about it. Okay? He repented. He's going to be in the kingdom. And so is Eve. But it's going to be through that second tree that's in the garden that Adam will have his salvation, just the same as everybody today on earth is offered as well. And the man and his wife were both naked, and they were not ashamed. The reason they weren't ashamed is they had no idea of what righteousness and evil was. They couldn't do righteousness, nor could they do evil. Well, they could do righteousness because, there's people all over the face of the earth today that are actually doing some acts of righteousness. They're not stealing, they're not murdering, they're not talebearing, they're not bringing false testimony against their neighbors, they're not out there, just, preaching lies as many do today. So therefore, there are acts of righteousness that every single person on this earth is actually doing because Adam opened up that law. Adam didn't know the whole law when it was opened up to him. He didn't understand. He didn't eat from the entire tree. Okay? And I want you to think about those things. I'm going to have to shut this down right now. I've got to go pick up my youngins for the Sabbath for my weekend visitation. But contemplate on those things that I just brought forth for you, and I hope that, Satan will have her hand pulled away from my brain here a little bit. I know that all these tests and trials come on me, any illness or thing of that sort. I know that it's Yahshua Messiah that's allowing these things, otherwise it would never take place, just to see whether I'll curse him or not. And instead of cursing, I do give Yahshua Messiah praise. I praise my Heavenly Father Yahweh through Yahshua. But Yahweh gave everything to Yahshua right now. And Yahweh told us that we are to obey His Son, that we are to worship His Son. Yahweh gave all the holy Malakim to Yahshua at this time. Everything in heaven and earth has been placed under Yahshua's feet. So if we do not kiss the Son, lest He be angry, then we're going to perish from the way. Lest His wrath be kindled just a little. That's all it's going to take, is just a little bit of His wrath. So let us all contemplate that whether you believe the law is done away with or not, you still are keeping parts of it. And because you're keeping parts of it, it proves to you that it is right to keep the law, even though you may deny the other things like not to fornicate or commit adultery and things of that sort. But the law is right, it is just, and if you break it, which you are doing because you deny it, death will come. But we're going to see what this tree of life is all about here in this next upcoming video. And until then, I say, peace be with you, and I mean it. Let's all keep the commandments together. Walk toward Yahshua Messiah. He is the door, and that door opens up to the 12 doors of the kingdom that I hope that we all might wander through. Till then, peace. Praise Yahweh.